Hello there. Welcome into a Monday edition of the show. This should be interesting. Pleasure to have you, whether it's on your radio, online, or on the free Extra Sports 1300 app, sponsored by Diversus Health, mental health and well-being for all. A veritable cornucopia of sports topics await you. And yes, very much I would like your thoughts at 719 247 1313. We will get into the football. We will get a lot into the football. But we have to start with the news that broke on Friday night. And the Avs knew exactly what they were doing. Friday news dump. But I would say that it was even more intentional, the timing in which the Mikko Rantanen trade was announced, considering that not only was it a Friday, not only was it a Friday evening, but on altitude on Friday night, it was yours truly and Tyler Mon calling an Air Force hockey game. So you get a Friday night that is devoid of both the Nuggets and the Avalanche. And you leave it up to Tyler Mon and Ryan Kaufman to break the news on altitude. Gotta say, it was a little bit interesting getting into the Mikko Rantanen trade as we were calling the Air Force hockey game, but that was the case. They knew that this would not, Chris McFarland and the Avalanche knew this would not be well received. And that's the why of when the news broke. But I always find it interesting with the Friday news dump, even in the 24-hour news cycle that we live in, did they think it wouldn't be a topic today? Like, it would be one thing if the Denver Broncos were playing in the AFC Championship, like maybe the Mikko Rantanen trade would be pushed down a little bit. But to be fair to the situation, there's no good time to announce that a key member of a Stanley Cup winning team and one of the most popular players in your franchise's history, probably a quarter of all Avalanche jerseys in circulation right now have the name Rantanen on the back of them. There was no good time to announce that deal, and there was probably no good time to trade him. But that's what the Colorado Avalanche did. They send him to the Carolina Hurricanes. They get Marty Necas back, as well as Jack Drury, some middle round picks, and Chicago steps in. In a weird way, Chicago is the biggest loser in all this because, like, Connor Bedard standing there, they didn't even get anything. They gave up Taylor Hall and got nothing. But Chicago facilitated this trade by eating over half of Mikko Rantanen's salary to get him to Carolina. Here's Avalanche general manager Chris McFarland on the why.
These are tough decisions. There's nothing done in a vacuum. You know, Mikko earned the right to be an unrestricted free agent, and he's 5 months away from that. So you got to make these hard decisions. The player has to make them, and the club has to make them, and that's what we did. And you know, getting two cost-controlled assets was important.
Couple things there. One, don't call them cost-controlled assets. There are times, and I know Chris McFarland has to remove emotion from it, and he can't feel any loyalty the way that fans do or teammates do or coaches do, even though it has been an organizational strategy to continue to carry the contract of Gabriel Landeskog with no resolution in sight. So maybe they are a bit loyal. But when you're trading a player that has meant as much to the Colorado Avalanche as Mikko Rantanen, maybe don't describe what you're getting back as cost-controlled assets. Like, there is a PR side of this, and maybe just going a little bit more on how good you think these two players are going to be would be the right way to go, instead of calling them cost-controlled assets. It just makes you sound more cold, more unfeeling, and it doesn't strike the right tone knowing how this news is going to be received. The second thing, something stinks here. Something isn't adding up. Because Mikko Rantanen, and this was published by a Finnish newspaper, and we've tried to figure out things that, the Valeri Nichushkin interview that was conducted entirely in Russian, and the little supposed tiff between Arturi Lehkonen and Mikko Rantanen because of what Arturi's dad said. I have learned my lesson then to go in depth on an English translation of a foreign news article or interview. But as recently as today, Peter Baugh, who used to be on the Avs beat for The Athletic, now I think he covers the Rangers, or maybe he's kind of a roving reporter. He tweeted out today that Mikko Rantanen told him to his face that he was willing to take below market value, which we all assume to be about $14 million a year. $5 million more. $5 million more dollars than Mikko Rantanen currently counts against the Avalanche cap, or did count against the Avalanche cap. Keep that number in mind. $5 million. That's how much of a raise Mikko Rantanen was looking at least we think. Mikko Rantanen is saying to a Finnish newspaper and to Peter Baugh that he was willing to take less than market value. So without that, at least you could say, well, Mikko Rantanen was set to make the most money a winger has ever made in the history of hockey. And that was what Chris McFarland couldn't reconcile with the Avs' current salary cap situation. Not saying you agree with it, but we'd at least be all talking the same language, be all agreeing on the same thing. Well, here's Mikko Rantanen saying I was willing to take less. So all that stuff about him earning the right to be a free agent and stuff, I get that. But if Mikko Rantanen was willing to take less, two things. One, why couldn't the Avs make it work? And two, why wasn't he already signed to an extension? If the idea of going to free agency wasn't that big of a deal to Mikko Rantanen, maybe he did, but if he's willing to take less, then sign on the dotted line and sign an extension at an agreed upon number. If you're trying to get market value, you go to free agency. If you're willing to take less, you usually sign an extension. Now, I'm, filling in blanks here. But something doesn't add up if Chris McFarland is balking at Mikko Rantanen's asking price, yet Mikko Rantanen's asking price is supposedly lower than we all assumed it to be. It's even more of a question of why the Avalanche couldn't make it work. And we'll see if we'll ever find out what the number was and all that kind of stuff. I suppose we're going to find out. But if Mikko Rantanen goes to the free agent market now, he has no loyalty. right? He has no incentive to sign for below market value, so we may never know what that number was. But looking at the trade, setting that aside for a moment, and I will join everyone in saying I was shocked. When I was informed on Friday night at Cadet Ice Arena that this was going to go down, I was floored. I took it as granted that Mikko Rantanen would finish the season with the Avs. He would go out, fetch a few other deals, come back to the Avs, say this is what it is. They'd work together, and Mikko Rantanen would be an Av moving forward. I really thought he would be. Because if this was a distinct possibility, which it sure seems to me like in retrospect it was, why don't you try to make a move in the offseason? And why are you waiting till almost the trade deadline? I mean, the number of players with Mikko Rantanen's production that have been traded in season, you can count on one hand. One of the deals was Gretzky going to St. Louis, and I forget the other ones, but he's the fifth player with this type of production in a season in the past few seasons that has ever been dealt. It does not happen, is the point. It doesn't happen. A trade of this magnitude does not happen in the middle of a season with a player as productive as Mikko Rantanen. So color me shocked. The return back is as good as I could expect. Maybe a premium draft pick, but let's not start to act like we care that much about NHL draft picks. Unless they were getting Chicago's pick. Carolina's one of the best teams in the NHL. It's going to be where the Avs have been drafting. So could they have gotten a better draft pick? Should they have gotten a better draft pick? Okay, but I'm not going to sit here and pretend that I care deeply about NHL draft picks. I'm worried about the NHL level talent that they're getting back. And in Natchez and in Drury, it was about as good of a return as I could expect. And in doing this, the Avalanche have kept their championship window open. We'll talk more about Natchez later and what he brings to the table and what he did in the 2 games this weekend. You're a really good up-and-coming star player. Okay, and it's reasonable to say that he's going to get better playing with Nathan MacKinnon. Jack Drury gives them depth. It's as good of a return as I could expect, quite honestly. So the Avs have ensured that their window stays open. Certainly as opposed to letting Mikko Rantanen walk at the end of the year and him sign somewhere else. However, the idea that the Colorado Avalanche will recover from this, put the puzzle together, even with another move down the road, and we could talk about that as well. But off of this move, that they are going to make it, get over the shock, figure out the right combinations, get chemistry, and be able, in a few months' time, to run the gauntlet that is the Stanley Cup playoffs, the most difficult prize to win in all of sports. There is zero chance that the Avalanche are winning a Stanley Cup this year. You cannot make this seismic of a shift in your organization removing a cornerstone piece of your franchise midstream and expect for everything to come together in just a few months' time to win that trophy. I'm not shutting the door on the Avalanche ever winning a Stanley Cup again. Because in a vacuum, I do like the players they got back. But the idea that they're going to make this kind of a move in the middle of a season and win a Stanley Cup, I think is incredibly far-fetched. And listen to Nathan MacKinnon and tell me I'm wrong.
It's just sad. I mean, I don't know exactly what happened. I know I called Mikko pretty shortly after. We talked close to 20 minutes. So, but yeah, I mean, it's just unfortunate. Obviously, losing a great friend, great teammate. Yeah, I'm going to miss him.
Mikko Rantanen is not just one of the most gifted goal scorers in the NHL. He's not just one of the Avs' big three. He is one of the guys that toiled for years with this team when they were garbage. And he was a big reason why they kept advancing and growing and evolving and gotten better. And he's a big reason why they added another Stanley Cup to their trophy case. You don't trade a player that means that much to a franchise in the middle of the season and expect to win a Stanley Cup. Not right away. I don't see it. So they kept the window open at the expense of this year. Who does that sound like? It sounds like another Kroenke Sports Enterprises brand. Keeping the window open. We got to keep the window open. Just because you keep the window open doesn't mean you're going to win. It's possible. But that's where you got to see what else this franchise is going to do. Because Marty Necas is not better than Mikko Rantanen. And as the old saying goes, if you give up the best player in the deal, you lose the trade. The Avalanche lost this trade. No matter how much you like what they got back from Carolina, they lost this trade. They gave up the best player. I don't see how they can win a Stanley Cup this year. And Chris McFarland has a lot of work to do to not just keep this window open, but maximize this window. Take your thoughts on the Mikko Rantanen trade, 719-247-1313. We'll weave in some football, and we'll do that coming up next. Of course, we'll start with the AFC and talk Chiefs, Bills, and yes, that third entity that seems to come into play so often in games with the Kansas City Chiefs. That's next here on Extra Sports 1300. We'll get to the AFC Championship here in just a moment. First, your thoughts on the Avalanche trading Mikko Rantanen on Friday night. Martin Necas as well as Jack Drury coming back. Avs lose to the Bruins, beat the Rangers over the weekend. We'll talk about that more at the top of the hour. From the 719, it's a good trade, Kaufman. Better get something for him now than to use puck bag later. Cost-controlled asset. When Gretzky got traded, Messier was devastated but said it's just business. The owner can do as he sees fit. Well, two things in there. One, you are correct in what Mark Messier said. If you recall, that season, the Edmonton Oilers were bounced as early in the playoffs as they had been bounced in years at the hands of, altogether now, the LA Kings. They barely finished above 500. Glenn Sather stepped down as head coach. They changed coaches. They had their earliest playoff exit that they had in years, the year they got rid of Wayne Gretzky. And that's my biggest point. The Avs are still trying to win a Stanley Cup right this second, right now, this season. I'm saying this eliminates them from Stanley Cup contention. They are not going to win a cup. And the Edmonton Oilers in the 88-89 season are my proof of point. But what you're saying or implying, yes, the Edmonton Oilers after that season and after Sather stepped down, they did come back and win the Stanley Cup the next year. And that's why I say Chris McFarland has certainly kept the window open. But there has to be other things that happen in order for the Avs to be restored as a favorite to win the Stanley Cup. And we got to see how Necas fits in. And if Drury adds what Chris McFarland thinks he'll add in the depth. But the biggest part of this is the emotional blow that this strikes against the organization. Here's Jared Bednar after the trade.
Really tough day. Like, you lose a good friend, good teammate, great player. It's hard to see. It's hard, you know, but I understand the business side of things, and you know, it's a two-way street, and they weren't able to get a deal done, and then you know, teams are calling, and you got to smooth business, you know. You got to get what you can, and I think we got some good players that can come in and help us, but it doesn't make it any easier. You know, it's tough to see Mikko go for sure.
That's what they won't recover from this season. And don't let one locker room after a thrilling win over New York convince you otherwise. The shock of this is not going to wear off in 24 hours. They still have to figure out the fit and get consistent. How, you know, Casey Middlestad came in, and when he joined the Avs, he was playing at an unreal level. He played great. And then yet, playoffs rolled around. They got virtually nothing out of Middlestat. Same could happen with Necas. Now Necas has more of a playoff pedigree than Middlestat did, but the idea that this is just it's going to happen, the Avs are going to get over it, they're going to figure out Necas' fit with the team, Necas is going to produce and get comfortable, and then they're going to go in the playoffs, and they're going to win 4 rounds, and they're going to win the most. And I was just talking last week about how without Valeri Nichushkin, they're not a Stanley Cup favorite anyway. And now you compound the issue even more because you lose Mikko Rantanen and you still have not gotten back Valeri Nichushkin. All I am certain of is that the Avalanche got back as much as you could expect them to, which will keep them in contention. We would look at them as a viable contender for at least the next couple of years. And I'm also certain that they're not winning it this year. I have a theory. And that's all this is right now. It's a theory. But I'll float it, see what you think. I actually don't think that this is about balking at Mikko Rantanen's asking price. Not at its face. I think they went into this season fully expecting to come to an agreement with Mikko Rantanen. But there are two albatrosses around this team's neck. And you know one very well. It's Gabriel Landeskog. And LTIR isn't going to help them sign Mikko Rantanen if they ever want to get Gabriel Landeskog back on the ice. So the fact that they cannot figure his situation out is a problem. But also, my theory is that the Avs would have looked to move Valeri Nichushkin. Now, I'm not saying that this was the best idea, but I think they were looking at it like this is too good of a player to just bail on when everything happened. Let's get him back. Let's get him productive again, and then we'll look to move him and keep Mikko Rantanen. And because Valeri Nichushkin ends up getting hurt and is now out for well past the trade deadline, we think, he is not a tradable asset. We're talking about $5 million here. Or, it could be a Sam Girard, although the Avs blue line needs him. But you look $5 million. If we're really talking about 14, it's $5 million you got to figure out. Gabriel Landeskog hasn't played for you since you hoisted the Stanley Cup, and he's $7 million. Not just for this year, but for years to come. Valeri Nichushkin, who you can't do anything with, is making over $6 million. I don't think it was the Avs' first choice to trade Mikko Rantanen. And I also don't think that they were balking so much at Mikko Rantanen's asking price. So the one bit of grace I will extend towards Chris McFarland is I think some circumstances in some contracts kind of boxed him into a corner. However, could the decisions made when it comes to Valeri Nichushkin and Gabriel Landeskog not play somewhat into Mikko Rantanen getting traded? I think it has to. I think every contract you have to look at and say, is this hampering them? How much does this guy make? This guy makes a little bit more than he probably should. But that you can't LTIR your way out of, and Vegas figured this out. Like, it was great for them to get rental players and they kept trying to make it work. But eventually you've seen what has happened. Eventually you can't keep LTIRing your way through it. And some tough decisions had to be made in Vegas. And the Avs continue to kick the can down the road on one of the most difficult decisions that they need to make as an organization, which is, what do we do with Gabriel Landeskog? And in the meantime, they were boxed into a corner to where, without resolutions to Gabriel Landeskog and to some extent Valeri Nichushkin's situations, they had to make this move. Because would you choose at this stage in their career Mikko Rantanen or Gabriel Landeskog? Would you choose Mikko Rantanen or Valeri Nichushkin? Because this whole we got to get deeper thing, that's what Calvin Booth's been trying to do. Right? Oh, we're not going to be maybe as top line good, but we got some depth pieces. We'll make up for it. That's what the Nuggets have been trying to do. To me, numbers out the window for a moment. I want Mikko Rantanen, Nathan McKinnon, and Cale Makar. And then go from there. And I think that's the sentiment of many people that cover and root for the Colorado Avalanche. It's not to say that those three guys alone with zero depth would win a Stanley Cup. I understand that depth is important. But it's always that balance of how much are you giving up off the top line in order to make your team deeper. And I don't think if this is it, I don't think it's it, but if it is it, the Avs are not a better hockey team today than they were 3 days ago. They're just not. Jack Drury is not going to make up the difference to me. Necas is not as good as Mikko Rantanen, and adding Jack Drury doesn't make the Avs better than they are with Mikko Rantanen. That's why I think there has to be something else. But it's like the Nuggets have kept saying, we're not going to bring back Kentavious Caldwell-Pope, and please don't misunderstand me. Mikko Rantanen getting traded, losing him is far more consequential and far more detrimental than losing Kentavious Caldwell-Pope. But there are some similarities here. The Nuggets said by losing Kentavious Caldwell-Pope, by not paying him, they would have flexibility. And yet I sit here and the Nuggets have still not made a single trade with all of this flexibility that they have gained. So I don't think Chris McFarland is done. I think he's going to try to do something, but he better do something. And I am a little bit weary of the idea of this will all of a sudden open up the Avs to do so many other things to be able to make themselves a more well-rounded hockey team. Because you still have to have assets. Cost-controlled assets, as Chris McFarland put them. There's still not a lot on this Avs team that you can be willing to part with to make yourself better. But that's a longer timeline. Okay, I'm talking about from now until this trade deadline, but I'm also talking about free agency. I'm also talking about next trade deadline. Right in the here and now, the most important thing is by trading Mikko Rantanen, the implications of that are that I cannot see the Avalanche winning a Stanley Cup this year. And as much as they have opened up the window moving forward, that window always slams shut earlier than you think it will. To that end, we will shift to football. AFC Championship. Chiefs Bills next on Extra Sports 1300. The big game matchup is set, and it's time to plan your big game party by placing your pre-order with Hooters. You could get 50 boneless wings for $79.99 or 50 bone-in wings for $89.99. And if you prefer to watch Philly and Kansas City at Hooters, you could certainly do that. And you could win a custom engraved Hooters Colorado Solo stove for watching the big game at Hooters on February 9th. Either way, whether watching the game at home or at Hooters, make Hooters a part of your big game plans. Now, many people, I'm sure, maybe you, will say, I'm not watching the game. Not with this matchup, I'm not. I think you will, but I understand the emotion. I do. This was probably not the people's matchup with the Kansas City Chiefs and the Philadelphia Eagles. But I think most people will still watch the Super Bowl. Maybe I'm wrong on that. Let's talk about that AFC Championship, shall we? We were, and I hate this. I hate that this is the case. But no matter where you come down on the discourse surrounding the Kansas City Chiefs the last couple of weeks, whether you believe that the Chiefs are getting help or believe they're not, or agree with most of the calls that are made on their behalf, or you don't agree with them, the fact of the matter is we all went into that game last night looking for the call. We were all looking for it. Because of the discourse surrounding the Kansas City Chiefs, we're all looking for that one call that we could pick apart, argue about, debate, say this ultimately changed the game, this made my point against Kansas City or for Kansas City or whatever it was. We were all going into that game waiting for it, looking for it. Whether you wanted to or not, just that the discourse was just so much that you couldn't help yourself watching yesterday. You were just waiting for it. Is that going to be the call? No, that one's pretty good. Is that one? No, that's not it. And unfortunately for the NFL, we got two of them. The Xavier Worthy play and Josh Allen on fourth down. Let me give my take on those two plays before I get into my bigger point here. The Xavier Worthy catch should have been ruled an incompletion. Not, it's either an interception or an incompletion because then your bias is showing. The whole premise around that play was that possession did not look like it was clearly established by either party. Okay, we all understand the tie goes to the receiver. Okay, but it didn't look like either really had great possession of the ball. Now, the ball didn't come out after the nose of the football hit the ground. So apparently that's what the officials were saying. Well, they're saying the ball didn't. Somebody had to have possession. Ball didn't bounce out. Somebody was hanging on to it. But here's the thing. If it wasn't clear that either had possession and the nose of the football hits the ground, that's an incompletion. But like all of these video replay reviews, the burden of proof, you have to find enough to overturn it. So they could use their normal thing of, well, it stands. Not it's confirmed, not definitely it was. They just go call stands. We said that Xavier Worthy had possession, and under that rule, the nose of the football can hit the ground. But to me, I think it should be one of the two people involved in the play has to have full possession. There can't be a question about it. The fact that it was almost a tie and the ball hit the ground, that to me says it should be ruled an incompletion. That should be an easy out for the official. So that one went to the Chiefs, and I don't think it should have. Now, there's the whole part that even if that was ruled an incompletion, the Chiefs would have then accepted the holding call. They still would have had possession. The Bills would probably not have a chance to go down and score because the Chiefs would waste more time, put a score on the board. But that's all an aside. What we're dealing with is just that call. Didn't think it was the right call. That should have been an incompletion. And then you have the fourth down with Josh Allen. I thought he got it. I thought he got the first down. But if I or anyone else says one way or another that he either definitively got it or definitively didn't get it, they are lying. They are lying. There is no way that anyone could know 100% whether Josh Allen got it. You can't even see the ball. I thought he got it, but there is technology that has existed for years. And you know me, I'm not a big more technology in sports. I don't like video replay review. But I make exceptions, right? Everyone's not 100% on something all the time. There are exceptions to every rule. And I say automated strike zone, I'm all about it. That seems like the technology would be reliable and it would be easy to use and easily accepted by sports fans. Same thing with measuring a first down. How in the world we are expecting these referees to decipher whether Josh Allen got a first down with literally every other football player on the field, on him, around him, in front of him? How are we still making them make these calls? I'm okay with margin for error. Or human error. I'm okay with that. But it looks like an impossibility. It's an impossibility to tell whether Josh Allen got that first down. And there is technology that exists, GPS technology, the same that lets you know where to turn next to get to your destination. We can use it by putting a chip into the football. And it could be like tennis, right? Or VAR. I know VAR is a touchy subject with soccer fans, but the premise of it, I'm saying the graphic, you could show this computer-generated animation where Josh Allen is removed, Chris Jones is removed, all the players are removed. All you see is the football and the line, and then they will show where the football was, and we will get some sort of proclamation that it got there or it didn't. It's so simple. It's a simple change that I think everyone can get behind, and it would make plays like that so much easier to legislate. But instead, we have two referees that have to untangle a mass of 300-pound men to figure out whether Josh Allen got the nose of the football, because he didn't push over the line, right? He either grazed the line if it was like a plane, like the end zone, he either grazed it or he was short. He didn't push past it. You wouldn't have to try and make that call. And the fact that the referee, I don't think either one of them got a great view of it and could really tell, because I don't think anyone on planet Earth can tell whether Josh Allen was definitely short or definitely over the line. But the fact that the referee, who they actually went with the spot of the referee who was facing Josh Allen's back, is comical. I don't think either one of them got a good look at it, but if you made me choose, it would be the guy that was facing Josh Allen's face versus the guy that was running in from behind him. It's just, and Adam Schefter tweeted something out yesterday about how they're going to make the eye in the sky thing more prevalent, perhaps, moving forward. Like, if there is any good that comes out of all this, because this is a really bad look for the NFL. Now, let me be abundantly clear. Neither call cost the Buffalo Bills the game. Because we got to stop with the whataboutism and looking at these raw numbers. You have to take each call and say, was that egregious? Was it egregiously in favor of the Chiefs? And does it alter the course of the game? And does it ultimately give the Chiefs the game? Because not every call does that. Just because the Chiefs give fewer penalties than the other team doesn't mean that all of the penalties that were called on the other team were game altering. So we can go around and around and around with all these numbers that are being thrown out. But can we just look at these two plays and say, I don't think they got either one right, but neither one cost the Buffalo Bills the game. But the fact that this discourse is now going to continue for 2 weeks leading up to the crown jewel event of that league is a terrible look. And it must be addressed, if for no other reason, just for PR purposes. The NFL has got to do something. Because if you are an NFL is rigged for the Kansas City Chiefs and you are looking for every Jawan Taylor jump or every potential hold that may or may not be, you are living a miserable life, and I refuse to join in with you on that. But these calls that are available to everybody, that we all see, and that are not really that much up to judgment, that both go Kansas City's way, perpetuate this conversation, give breath to the rigged crowd, and it's going to be the conversation, at least for this week. And then media day rolls around for the Super Bowl. You don't think that the Eagles are going to be asked about the idea that they not only have to get the better of the Chiefs, but have to get the better of the referees? This is not going away. It's a terrible look for the NFL. It's not why the Bills lost the game. It's not. And the NFL is not rigged for the Kansas City Chiefs. But two calls yesterday went the Chiefs' way and probably shouldn't have. And at least with one of them, there is something that the NFL could do yesterday to fix it. This technology has existed for years. And for whatever reason, cheapness comes to mind. They won't do it. 719-247-1313. Get more into the Bills and the Chiefs, the things that actually decided the game. Also talk about the NFC Championship as well and the legend of Saquon Barkley continuing. But coming up next, get back into the Mikko Rantanen trade. Let's talk about what the Avs got in return and what the early returns were for Marty Necas and the Colorado Avalanche. Went long that last segment, so let's just get right back to it, shall we? Drive Time Sports, welcome in for those of you just joining me. Brian Kaufman with you on this Monday. A lot to discuss, of course, the football, but also the trade of Mikko Rantanen. I'm looking at SportsCenter, and they're doing breaking news. I was like, oh, what is it? Oh, Jimmy Butler suspended indefinitely. Who cares? Well, if you're a Miami Heat fan, I suppose that you care, but that's there are bigger stories right now in sports in our neck of the woods as well. Let me just, like with the Rantanen trade, talking about it, you guys text in or message in. I want to get right to it. So a couple of your thoughts on what happened last night in the AFC Championship. Let's go. If you are watching the show, which you can do on our social media platforms at XTRA Sports 1300, Facebook, Instagram, X, etc. You can message right in. And Keaton, good to hear from you, buddy. I don't agree with you, but I welcome your thoughts. Keaton says that they have been called for one penalty in the last 7 playoff games. That's 28 quarters of football with only one penalty called. What a joke. I have to double check that because I know that the stat that ESPN put out was that in every one of the last 8 games, and I think 9 now because the Bills got called for more penalties than the Kansas City Chiefs last night, that the Chiefs have had more or had fewer penalties called in their last 8 games. I think that was the stat that was thrown out there. But this is the problem. You put out the raw numbers, and I did this too last week, and I got to take some part in this as well. I'm saying Patrick Mahomes does not get the most pass interference calls. He does not get the most roughing the passer penalties. He does not do this, and the Chiefs aren't the least penalized team, nor do their opponents get penalized the most. And then a stat will come back and say, well, in the playoffs, they have the second longest streak in the history of the playoffs of getting fewer penalties called than their opponent, which, by the way, I found it interesting that one of the teams that did have a longer run of games with having fewer penalties called on them than their opponents was the John Elway Denver Broncos. Not the ones that won Super Bowls, but the ones that John Elway dragged to the Super Bowl. They had a longer streak than the Chiefs. So then I could do the whataboutism, and I could be like, well, I don't hear any Broncos fans talking about what's happening with the Chiefs is the same thing that happened to the Broncos in the 80s. And then you come back with, well, the last 8 games, they haven't been this. And all of that is relevant, but it's not the most relevant thing. The most important thing is to take the calls as they come up, because there's an easy explanation on why the Kansas City Chiefs get called for fewer penalties than their opponents. They're better coached, they're more well-disciplined, and they're on an all-around better team. But can I say that every one of those 8 games, every one of those calls that went against the other team and didn't go against Kansas City were just because of that? That's too general. So this is an opportunity with the AFC Championship to really look at those calls and say, were they the right call? Did they benefit Kansas City? And did they benefit Kansas City to the point that they won the game because of them? I would say yes, yes, no. And Brett, I think, hits the nail on the head when it comes to the 4th down. The 4th down call was terrible. If it wasn't terrible, the execution was. You don't do a tush push with a halfback. You put your biggest, fattest 2 people behind your quarterback and push them forward. That play, the Bills got outcoached. And I would say chalk this up to 2 things can be true. I think Josh Allen got the first down. So in that way, the call was wrong. Do I think it was egregiously wrong? No, because we can't tell. Not with 100% accuracy, not even with, barely over 50% accuracy. And that's why they need to use the GPS technology. If we're going to continue to allow teams, and I'm not just talking about the tush push, I'm talking about any QB sneak, there would still be a massive humanity that the referees would have to try to see through. Unless we're going to eliminate all of that and do the 7-on-7 so everything's easier to see, there's got to be some technology that we can institute in small portions to help alleviate some of these issues. In the GPS technology with the ball to measure first downs, we're doing this with 2 old men with a chain. Like, what year is this? I'm not anti-technology. I just think that there is a tipping point in which we are too reliant on technology in sports, and I don't want us to get there. But some technology is good. The GPS in the football for that exact play needs to be instituted. Can you get it up and running before the Super Bowl? I'm all for that. Test it out in the Pro Bowl. And then get it going for the Super Bowl. I'm all about that. But Brett's second part of that text, is really why the Bills lost the game. We were going to run into one of two scenarios. We would be talking about one of two things today. We'd either be talking about how the Chiefs run, because no one thought it was going to be a blowout yesterday, one way or another. Okay. We were either going to be talking about how the Chiefs luck or, their good fortune, whatever you want to call it, when it comes to these close games, would run out. Right? This Chiefs team has been living on a razor's edge, and it finally caught up with them, finally cost them a game. They weren't able to get that one thing that tipped the scales in their direction. Or we'd be talking about a Bills team that most people believed was not as talented as in years past, finally reaches its ceiling, which was higher than many people thought it would be. But there was a ceiling, and I think that was yesterday. We found the ceiling. The AFC Championship, an all too familiar place for the Buffalo Bills to have their season ended, was the same ceiling for this all in all less talented team than previous ones that Josh Allen has had. The Buffalo Bills defense allowed way more points than they normally allow. The Buffalo Bills defense, even against the Kansas City Chiefs, they allowed fewer points than they did last night. The Buffalo Bills defense was not playing at the level that they have for much of the season. Some of the decision-making by Sean McDermott, once again, questionable. And the execution overall, especially in those moments like the fourth down, like the 2-point conversions, was lacking. It is crazy to me that the game immediately following the Philadelphia Eagles and everything we saw, and I'm not saying the Bills and the Chiefs watched that game, but the juxtaposition of us watching that bleep show at the goal line when the Eagles are getting ready for the tush push and bringing forth all that debate about whether the tush push should be allowed and all that kind of stuff. It is allowed in the rules. The Bills have this giant of a man playing quarterback for them. Why they're doing this stupid, I'm going to run, well, on the 2-point convert, I'm going to go left. I'm not going to go straight. I'm going to go back and over and then go. Like, the tush push exists. I get it. It's the Eagles' specialty. They do it better than everyone else. It's a copycat league. Why aren't the Bills copying the Philadelphia Eagles? And then, to Brett's point, on the fourth down, was it Curtis Samuel pushing him? And then let's even spin this forward and talk about Dalton Kincaid. That game yesterday was very reminiscent of all these other Bills-Chiefs games in the playoffs, where you look at the Buffalo Bills and you swear that their quarterback is good enough to beat this team. And Josh Allen is. But you look around him and you're saying there's not enough there. And that's why that was my premise of picking Kansas City on Friday was I said, well, Chiefs have a better head coach. They have a better defense. They have better weapons in the passing game. And then you just kind of go down it and you're like, Chiefs are better. And that showed yesterday. And during that commercial break, before the throw to Kincaid, my son is sitting on the couch next to me. I turn to him and I say this is where Steve Spagnuolo will dial up something that will confuse the heck out of Josh Allen. Because it happens all the time. There's a Groundhog Day feel to yesterday. Steve Spagnuolo dialed up something that absolutely had Josh Allen and the Bills fooled. And they had no answer for it. Now, there's been a lot of people today that are talking about, Allen should have recognized this. I'm not even going to get into all that. Steve Spagnuolo did something he hadn't done the entire game and unleashed it at the perfect time and had Josh Allen scrambling for his life. And yet, he somehow, because of his demigod-like talents, still gave Dalton Kincaid an extremely catchable ball, and Kincaid can't catch it. Which, of course, is exactly what happened the week prior, which benefited Buffalo because Mark Andrews couldn't make what many of us would view as a routine catch on a 2-point conversion. If you want to say the Buffalo Bills lost that game more than the Chiefs won that game, I could see it. I get why you would go there. But once again, it's the Buffalo Bills letting Josh Allen down, where Josh Allen gives them everything that he possibly can and gives them every opportunity to win. And whether it's the coach, whether it's his skill position players, whether it's his defense, it lets him down. And why didn't they give the ball more to James Cook? Kind of the whole premise of why the Buffalo Bills may be a better match for Kansas City than they ever have been was James Cook. And yet, where was he when the game was on the line? Bills lost that game. Chiefs won that game. You could go either way on that. I'll take your thoughts. 719-247-1313. Coming up next, get into the Avs return for Mikko Rantanen. I'll take your thoughts on the trade itself. But let's talk about what they're getting in Drury and Naked and what went down this weekend. He doesn't even know. Have you seen that video floating around online that when he was at I think it's the scouting combine that he had like 3 different pronunciations? Natchez, which apparently is more Americanized. I don't know. We'll all learn together because he's now a member of the Colorado Avalanche. More on that next. Welcome back, Drive Time Sports. We're bouncing back and forth between the Mikko Rantanen trade and a Championship Sunday. My thoughts on the NFC side of things coming up here shortly. Again, if you're watching the show on our social media platforms, you can interact right there. This is a great point that Keaton brings up. And he says, he's interacting on Facebook and says, doesn't seem like the trade, the Mikko Rantanen trade, was communicated to the other leaders of the team either. So that's the big issue. That struck me. That everyone was stunned. As if they all found out the same time we did. A trade of this magnitude with somebody who has been as integral to the team's success as Mikko Rantanen. Does that warrant a little heads up? It doesn't seem like Chris McFarland gave anybody. And it wasn't even... It's not even the timing of the trade. I got a sense listening to especially Nathan McKinnon and Jared Bednar, I got the sense that they weren't even apprised that these conversations were happening. Maybe Jared Bednar, but I don't think Nathan McKinnon was made aware of this, that they were looking to try. And Mikko Rantanen was blindsided by it. I don't know if it's written in the GM handbook that you have to do it, but it feels not morally the right thing to do. It feels like the right thing to do to brace your team for a shock. And that's my big takeaway with Chris McFarland. He comes across so cold and calculating in all of this. And I get it. It's a business. We could keep saying it's a business, the business side of it. And I get it. But these are also human beings. Okay? So the decision itself is business. And we can debate whether it's good or bad business. But it just doesn't seem like Chris McFarland felt like with the gravity of the trade he was about to make that he needed to, pull his leadership group aside and say, hey, I just want to let you know we did this or we're getting ready to do this. I don't know if you have to let Mikko Rantanen know ahead of time, but the remaining members of the Avalanche, especially ones with letters on their jerseys, you would think that a heads up. And then he calls them, the players they get back cost-controlled assets. It's like he just doesn't come across great in all of this. And that part of it will subside. That will be the lesser of the thing, but it's just one of the things on the top of my mind in reacting to the trade here. The bigger part of this is how it impacts the Avalanche. And that's why I keep going back to, I don't think they recover in time to win a Stanley Cup this year. I think it's as good as done that they're not going to win this year. The question is, how viable will they be moving forward? And the player they got back, let's talk about the main player in all this, Marty Necas. If you watch the Avs this weekend, you see what this guy brings to the table. And if you are very siloed with the Avalanche and their schedule, you only see Carolina a couple of times. But now you've seen him back-to-back days. Dude's talented. And on Sunday, I saw the Avs power play work better than it has in weeks with Necas. And you know the reason why? Because he shot the puck. You know, the 2 times that he clanged it off of the post? Like, that's what you've been wanting if you're an Avs fan out of the power play. Just shoot the dang thing. Go, shoot it. And Necas just came in, and it's no surprise, right? If you watch Carolina, they are the hockey version of shoot first, ask questions later. And that's why I keep saying, and now my feeling on this has even grown more. I've always said the matchup that we all deserve to see in the Stanley Cup final is Carolina and Colorado, because it would be just the most entertaining series ever. And I admire so much about the way Carolina plays the game of hockey. And one of the things they do that I admire so much is they just grip it and rip it. And bringing that mentality into a team that a lot of times likes to play with their food a little bit, wait for the perfect shot to open up rather than just taking a shot. They get a little too cute on the power play. And Nate just comes in there like a breath of fresh air, taking how they acquired him out of the equation. If you can for a moment and just watch the guy, you're like, that's what the power play needs. They just need a dude that's like, puck's on my stick, throwing it at the net. So Necas is an incredibly exciting player. Fast. He's like 7 points back of Mikko Rantanen. So if you just look at the trade in terms of the pieces and the talent, you're like that, getting a player like that back, pretty good. But again, that's not factoring in the time it takes him to really mesh with the team. And the fact that, can he elevate to the level of Mikko Rantanen, because they need the level of Mikko Rantanen to win a Stanley Cup. All that is what I question in this, 5 months? Moving forward, I think that the Avs have a chance here. And that's where we go from here. Right? Is there something else that Chris McFarland is cooking up? What does this do for them moving forward? Necas can be, and don't forget, Necas is going to break the bank in 2 years. So it's not like they got a guy that they have under control for the next 5 or 6 years. This guy is due a payday. But that's where my theory on Valeri Nichushkin and the Gabriel Landeskog of it all is that the Avs will have a chance, they hope, to figure some of these other things out. And then when it's time for Necas to be paid, hopefully he deserves a payday and the Avs are in a better situation to be able to indeed pay him. But this team right now, on paper, not winning a Stanley Cup. This team behind the scenes, losing a player that has meant as much to the team as Mikko Rantanen, not winning a Stanley Cup this year. But the window is not closed. And the next Colorado Avalanche championship team could feature Marty Necas. I don't hate the return. That's not what I'm talking about. It's the timing. It's the idea that the Avs can still win a Stanley Cup this year, making this kind of a deal. It's all of that other stuff that right now I think is more pertinent. But I do want to mention something that came out on social media the other night from Frank Saravalli. So after the Mikko Rantanen trade happened, Frank Saravalli tweeted out that he didn't know how to process this, but an impeccable source told him that this trade, as seismic a shift as this is in the NHL on both sides of the equation, because if I'm a Carolina Hurricanes fan, I am dancing in the street. I love this trade. This is my team going all in. But as seismic of a shift as we are now seeing in the NHL, with I think one Stanley Cup contender taking a big step forward and one Stanley Cup contender taking a small step back, Frank Saravalli says it wasn't the biggest thing on the table. And when I read that tweet, my immediate thought was Crosby. If he's talking about the Avalanche, like, could Carolina have went out and made a different move? Possibly. It could have been about Carolina. But if it was about the Avs, what could be bigger than this? And that, to me, would be a move to land Sidney Crosby. And maybe I'm just conditioned for any time Avs trade, those words kind of I'm Crosby. And it's a wonderful pipe dream that will probably never happen, but it's been a wonderful pipe dream for the Colorado Avalanche and their fan base for a few years now. I mean, what could be bigger than this? They weren't going to trade Cale Makar or Nathan McKinnon, so who the Avs give up can't be any bigger than Mikko Rantanen. I would argue what Carolina could give up wouldn't be bigger than Marty Necas. And I don't know who Carolina could have acquired that would be better than Mikko Rantanen. So to me, it has to be another suitor for Mikko Rantanen that wasn't Carolina. And for a lot of different reasons, really the only thing that would rise above a trade like this is if the Avalanche gave up Mikko Rantanen to acquire Sidney Crosby. Which from a salary cap standpoint I don't think totally computes, but it made my head spin because I'm like, what could be bigger than this? Again, 4 other trades in the history of the NHL in the middle of a season involving a player at the level of Mikko Rantanen. With the season he was having, with the seasons he has had in recent years. We haven't seen it. And here's Frank Saravalli being told it wasn't the biggest thing on the table. It's like, what could that possibly be? Take your theory. 719-247-1313. Coming up next, let's shift to the NFC side of things as the Eagles did the one thing that I said, as long as they don't do that, they're going to win. And they did it. Anybody into this like indoor golf simulator stuff? That's what's on my TV right now. I am not. I think it's, if I can be a little bit blunt, kind of dumb. I mean, I get it. If this is the golf that Tiger Woods can play, you can make a few shekels out of it, but it just, I don't know. And Tiger's walking out now, and it's like a smoke and a laser show, and let's watch him on Golf Simulator. Like, I think there's a curiosity to it. Like, if you told me that Michael Jordan was going to play NBA 2K or do Pop a Shot, like, I might tune in once. But this idea that this is going to, fill the void in our lives before golf season, the PGA Tour season starts, I don't see it. I need to change it. I'm going to change the channel. I don't like it. Just not my thing. Well, congratulations to the Philadelphia Eagles. They did the one thing that I told them, don't do this. Or I should say, they followed my advice. I said, don't go away from Saquon Barkley. Stay with Saquon Barkley, and you will be fine. And they did that. Kellen Moore, it's almost like he wants to get a head coaching gig. Of course, the decision is made much easier when Saquon Barkley, the second play of the game, rips off a 65-yard touchdown run, and you go, yeah, we're going to stick with that guy, I think, for the time being. But because the Eagles, we talked about this on Friday when Dutch called in. Thought I would hear from Dutch today. It's all right. We got 2 weeks till the Super Bowl. I'm sure I'll hear from him. But the feeling was the way Washington wins is if the Eagles screw it up. Because you could just look objectively and say that the Eagles are a better team than Washington. Right? Even with Jaden Daniels. Eagles are better. And they're at home. And they certainly learned a tough lesson during the regular season about letting Jaden Daniels hang around. But since the Eagles didn't screw it up yesterday, we saw the bottom really fall out of the Commanders. Right? This story, as great as it was and what happened yesterday, does not dampen it one bit. That team has a bright future. Jaden Daniels is going to be an MVP. And you watch the number of people that take Washington to win Super Bowl next year. Like, Washington, still a great story, even with what happened yesterday. But this is, as the playoffs go on, it becomes big boy time. And the better teams, the more talented teams, usually win out. And we saw the Eagles turn that into a laugher. But they will, I don't want to get too much into looking ahead yet. The best player on the field in New Orleans is going to be Saquon Barkley. And I would say that if you are thinking you're going to pick the Eagles, your argument better have Saquon Barkley in it. But what Saquon Barkley is doing, we haven't seen since Terrell Davis. Saquon Barkley, I think by probably the second carry of the Super Bowl, will pass Terrell Davis for the most rushing yards in a entire season. Regular season, postseason. It's a mere formality. I haven't decided yet if I think that the Eagles are going to win, but I'll promise you 13 days out from the Super Bowl, Saquon Barkley setting that record. What he's doing, we haven't seen since Terrell Davis. And you remember what an unbelievable year that was for Terrell Davis. He was unstoppable. And so is Saquon. The only person that stopped him really over the course of the season has been, depending on who holds the keys, Nick Sirianni or Kellen Moore. I haven't looked at the prop bets yet. I did see that the Chiefs are 1.5 point favorites, but Saquon Super Bowl MVP, where are those odds at? I have to take a look in there, but he's unbelievable again. He's been unbelievable this season. And right now, or maybe you say if he wins, if he loses, take all these potential scenarios into account. Where would he rank in the greatest free agent acquisitions in NFL history? For a sport that has not had free agency for that long, really, and a sport that does not, even though we get swept up in the free agent frenzy, because it's the NFL and we get swept up into everything, we get swept up into the schedule release. We don't see a lot of major free agents hit the market. And I'm sorry, we're not doing this revisionist history. Everyone could tell that Saquon Barkley was going to be an impact player wherever he went. This level of impact, no. That's where we have to get into these conversations that we didn't think we would be having. But I always said this about the running back thing. All the teams pushing back on the running backs and analytics and da-da-da. They never calibrated. There's a middle ground here. Yes, in general, you can find running backs later in drafts. It's probably pertinent for you to have what Sean Payton does and have multiple backs. The idea that everyone can have a bell cow back is a fallacy. That there aren't enough of them that exist, but they do exist. And I said this with Saquon Barkley and his contractual struggle with the Giants. I said this with Josh Jacobs and the Raiders. Like, there are running backs that are every bit what we romanticize about running backs. Right? That bell cow back, that difference maker. They still exist. They're not as abundant supply as they were 20 years ago, but they exist. And Saquon Barkley was one of them. Now, I get he doesn't make the impact on the Giants that he makes on the Eagles. But you knew Saquon Barkley was going to have a big impact on whatever team he landed with. He just so happened to land with maybe the perfect team to maximize what he still has as a running back. I mean, you think about, and maybe I'm missing one, in no particular order. Manning, obviously. Brady, Reggie White, Saquon Barkley. Am I missing somebody? Have we seen that many NFL free agents go somewhere and make the kind of impact that Saquon Barkley did? And I can't quite remember the conversation when Reggie White switched teams, but I remember it vividly with the Broncos landing Manning and the Buccaneers landing Tom Brady. There was some sense, much like with Saquon Barkley, that while it's extremely exciting, right? I remember we were tracking plain tail numbers with Peyton Manning, trying to figure out where he's going. It was incredibly exciting. And not much thought was paid to why the Colts got rid of him. Because it was just Peyton freaking Manning, it might be a Denver Bronco. And it's the same with the Buccaneers and Brady. But there was a sense with all of these guys, at least the three more recent ones, like they're not what they used to be. Doesn't mean they're not good. Doesn't mean they're not difference makers. Doesn't mean that the organization getting them shouldn't be over the moon excited. But there was some tempering of expectation. Like, look, Brady's leaving New England. He's another year older. And then with Peyton Manning, he just coming off the surgery. Colts come for a reason. Saquon Barkley, he's a running back, and we don't like running backs anymore, and we're devaluing them, and he's lost a step because he's playing with the Giants, and the Giants are terrible, so anybody's going to look less than playing on the New York Giants. All of these guys, there was a little bit of tempered expectation. And then all three of them got there and blew everybody away. Right? And you know how that first year with Peyton Manning ended. Raheem Moore. But the revelation that was, I mean, that was the team that Tebow was running that had to nickel and dime their way and I don't know, maybe call in a few favors from above to win football games, to score points. And then Manning shows up, and then that Broncos offense just exploded. And then the next year, they're even better than they were the previous year. And then Tom Brady, it's like, okay, what is this going to look like? And Chris Godwin and Mike Evans, he would be okay. And then you saw the results of that, and same with Saquon Barkley. You don't think that the team with the most unstoppable play in the NFL can figure out a way to open up a few holes for Saquon Barkley? But I think all of those are very much the landing spot mattered. Right? It did. Would Peyton Manning have done what he did with the Broncos if he ended up in Arizona? Debatable. Would Tom Brady have accomplished what he accomplished if he went to the Raiders instead of Tampa Bay? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. Tampa Bay was primed, and the Broncos were to a degree, primed and ready for a capable quarterback to come in there and lift them to new heights. And it's the same with the Eagles. They were primed to have a difference-making running back come in there and just, well, be what Saquon Barkley was this year. So he automatically is like one of the biggest X factors for the Super Bowl, 100%. Gotta talk about the tush push. Gotta have another conversation about that. We'll get into that. We still have 30 minutes left. Nuggets Bulls tonight. So done at 5:30. The three stories that are driving the show coming up at the top of the hour. But first, if you've been noticing that, you know what? I'm a little tired lately. Not really motivated to do anything. I've gained some weight. Could it all be signs of low testosterone? But there's no, I can't tell you anything on the radio on how to know. The only way you're going to know is if you go and get your levels tested. And at Low T Center would be preferable. They make it easy to do so. Simple tests with their on-site lab. You'll get results back right there. And if it is low T, just know you're in the right place to get it treated because their physicians specialize in treating low T with testosterone replacement therapy or TRT for each patient. And they craft their treatments for you. And in some cases, you can even potentially get TRT treatment sent to your home, and you could do it all at home. Don't even have to go into a clinic. But I'm getting ahead of myself because the first step is going into Low T Center and getting your levels checked. Actually, I need to correct myself and take an even further step back. The first step to get back to your best is to go to lowtcenter.com to book your appointment today. That's lowtcenter.com. Low T Center, reinventing men's healthcare. Hello there. Welcome into a Monday edition of Drive Time Sports. It is my pleasure to have you, whether you're listening on your radio, streaming it online or listening through the free Extra Sports 1300 app, sponsored by Diversus Health, Mental Health, and Wellbeing for All. 719-247-1313 is the text and the phone line if you would like to give your thoughts. Nuggets and doubles coming up at the bottom of the hour. Nuggets got to bounce back. Saturday wasn't great. Have some thoughts on that here shortly, but in the meantime, let's hit the three stories that are driving the show. All right, we start with the trade of one of the greatest Avalanche players of all time.
It's just sad. I mean, I don't know exactly what happened. I know I called Mikko pretty shortly after. We talked close to 20 minutes. So, but yeah, I mean, it's just unfortunate. Obviously, losing a great friend, great teammate. Yeah, I'm going to miss him.
That, of course, was Nathan MacKinnon after the Avs lost their first game without Mikko Rantanen on Saturday. They did bounce back with a pretty sweet win over the New York Rangers. Cale Makar hopping right out of the penalty box, which he shouldn't have even been in the first place. Stealing the puck away, taking it at the link of the ice and feeding Arturi Lehkonen for the game winner. So I think yesterday was important because it pressed pause on all the anger, bitterness, disappointment, sadness, all of these negative emotions that came as a result of the Mikko Rantanen trade. If you did not see it, Mikko Rantanen has traded to Carolina. The Avs get back Martin Necas and Jack Drury, couple of picks that you don't care much about. And Chicago, I don't know what they're doing, but they're like, hey, we want to participate. So they ate a lot of Mikko's salary and then unloaded Taylor Hall to Carolina as well. Not that you care, but I love the trade for Carolina. You want to talk about going all in. That's what Carolina did. What the Avs did was not the opposite of going all in, because that would be going all out and that would be entering a rebuild. And that is what the Chicago Blackhawks have been doing for the last few years. No, what this was, to me, was sacrificing this season for a chance to compete in future seasons. Marty Necas is a terrific player. He's got some upside as well to his game. Man, he looked like a breath of fresh air on that power play yesterday. Just getting the puck and shooting it. What a novel concept for the Avs power play, for a guy to just grip it and rip it. But that's the system Carolina plays. They're like, we don't care. We're just going to shoot it. If we could see the goalie, we're going to shoot it. So Necas can be very good for the Avalanche. And the next Stanley Cup winning team in Colorado could have Marty Necas on it. However, the idea that the Avalanche are going to trade a cornerstone piece of their franchise in the middle of a season, figure out line combinations, get chemistry, and then go and conquer the most difficult postseason that exists in professional sport to win its greatest prize, that I cannot get behind. That I do not see. That I will say is not going to happen. The Avalanche are not winning a Stanley Cup this year. Just, it's not going to happen. However, their window is not closed. And what Chris McFarland's job is now, because let's be honest, this is the first move that Chris McFarland has made that has really affected his Q score or his Q rating. Okay, Nazem Kadri, as difficult as that was, I think many people could understand it. This has been met, I think, rightly with universal hatred. Nobody likes this deal. And it's not because the Avs didn't get enough back. It's because Mikko Rantanen is so important to this team. And they're not going to win a Stanley Cup without him this year. And then there are other layers to it of, you know, players seeming completely blindsided by it. Like they didn't even see it coming. They didn't even, you know, it wasn't in a quiet moment where they go, yeah, I kind of saw the writing on the wall because it didn't seem like things were moving too well. Nathan MacKinnon was like me. I'm like, I understand why Mikko Rantanen wants to take it to free agency. Right, but I thought they'd work out a deal with the Colorado Avalanche and he'd be back and no problem. And Nathan MacKinnon said he thought it'd be like Gabriel Landeskog, that it would come down in the last moment, but eventually he would have his teammate. So everyone being blindsided by it. Now you throw in this extra wrinkle of Mikko Rantanen telling both a Finnish newspaper and Peter Baugh of The Athletic, friend of the program at one time when he was on the Avs beat, saying I would have taken not below market value, well below market value to stay in Colorado. Right now, essentially the Avs would have to figure out, come up with $5 million over what Mikko Rantanen currently gets paid to give him market value. $5 million. Doesn't seem like an exorbitant amount to keep one of your most important players in recent franchise history in an Avalanche sweater. But according to Mikko Rantanen, he's going to take well below market value. So what does that mean? They need to find $4 million, $3 million? We may never know. Because now Mikko Rantanen is going to leave Carolina and he's going to go to the highest bidder. That's exactly what he's going to do this offseason. There's no loyalty. There's no hometown discount that Mikko Rantanen is going to take. He is going to break the bank as he deserves to do. But he's saying, I was willing to take less. That's what I want to hear Chris McFarland talk about. And of course, I at least want to see him squirm because I know he's not going to answer the question, but I want to see somebody pose it to him. The Avalanche aren't winning a Stanley Cup this year. And the closest thing to what the Avalanche are doing is what you see with the Nuggets. Oh, yeah, we lose this guy and it hurts now, but we're deeper. We have more flexibility. We can do more. Well, I'm still waiting on the Nuggets to make a move this season with all this flexibility that they gained by letting KCP walk. Don't tell us about flexibility when it's that you didn't want to go into the second apron because your extremely wealthy owner did not want to pay dollar for dollar or 2 for 1. No flexibility, depth, cheapness. But with hockey, it's different because there's a hard cap. So it's not about going into any luxury tax threshold. But getting back to the Nuggets keep saying, we're set up for years, right? Don't think Lakers or Bulls. Think Spurs. Like 1 year down, 1 year back, 1 year. Okay. Well, I don't love the Nuggets' chances this season. Guess what? Minnesota Timberwolves, still a bad matchup for the Denver Nuggets, apparently. So we just had a team down the hall from the Avalanche feed you the same stuff of we're going to be better for this in the long run. You're going to be watching competitive teams for years to come. And it's like, at a certain point, give me one more Avs Stanley Cup and then tear the whole thing down. I don't care. I have multiple Stanley Cups, right? Right. Do I want a champion now, or do I want maybe a champion later? The Avs are not better today than they were 3 days ago. And the effect of this trade will be felt throughout the season, and it will keep them from winning a Stanley Cup. But unless Chris McFarland goes out and makes some moves and doesn't just say, well, wait for Callum Ritchie, then we'll still be getting strung along with a team that's pretty good, but not good enough. Chris McFarland is really under a microscope now. There were other things this weekend. Let's talk about them. Here's story number 2.
And zero's on the clock. The Chiefs have won again. They have beaten the Buffalo Bills 32-29. Another AFC championship and another trip to the Super Bowl. And now the Chiefs are on the doorstep of history.
Kevin Harlan on Westwood One. You heard it here on Extra Sports 1300. And I wish I could just take that clip and go, this is what happened in the game. This is what decided the game. But I can't, because of the discourse that has been around the Kansas City Chiefs for a few weeks now. We were all going into that game waiting for the call. Not necessarily because we knew it was going to go Kansas City's way and it would, because the league is rigged for Kansas City. None of that tinfoil hat nonsense. But just we knew that at some point during the game, there would be a questionable call, because there is in almost every football game. But because it's the Chiefs, it would be amplified tenfold. And we would be talking about that first and foremost. And wouldn't you know it, twice yesterday we had that. Xavier Worthy should not have had a catch. That should have been incomplete. The nose of the football hit, and I don't think it was definitive that either Xavier Worthy or the Bills defender had possession of it. I think if they're both jockeying for possession, or it's a tie, that kind of feels to me like if the ball then hits the ground, that it should be ruled incomplete. But they determine on the field, definitely Xavier Worthy caught it. So now the nose of the football can hit the turf. Don't agree with that one. I also really think Josh Allen got to that fourth down. I think he got it. But once again, the NFL's living in the Stone Age. In some ways, they're like 30 years into the future. In other ways, they're 30 years in the past. How is anybody supposed to tell if Josh Allen got that first down? How is anybody supposed to tell? The GPS technology exists to know definitively The way that Big Brother knows definitively where you are when you are getting directions on Apple Maps is the same thing the NFL can use to determine beyond a shadow of a doubt whether the nose of the football crossed the first down line. But no, we have to look at Josh Allen and be like, well, it kind of looks like it's in his arm and he's lunging. It's like the NFL is doing this to themselves at this point. Without accepting some common sense solutions to try and minimize the gray area in their officiating, they open themselves up for more problems. So I would say that both of those calls did go Kansas City's way. As it seems, all 50-50 calls go Kansas City's way. Just like they did do with LeBron, just like they did with the Patriots, just like they did with Michael Jordan's Bulls. That happens. It's not the best thing about sports, but the benefit of the doubt throughout sports history usually goes to the bigger of the two stars, to the better of the two teams. It does. But if that's what somebody is saying is the reason why the Kansas City Chiefs beat the Buffalo Bills, then they were just looking for that one call and they were checking out the rest of the game. Because to me, the bigger story is that the Buffalo Bills once again proved that they have a quarterback every bit good enough to win a Super Bowl. And so much else around him is so not good enough. The 2-point conversions, the coaching decisions by Sean McDermott, the defense having its worst day of the season. And Steve Spagnuolo, again, dialing something up exotic at the exact right moment to cause chaos with the Buffalo Bills. And yet, Josh Allen still delivered a perfectly catchable ball to Dalton Kincaid. Only slightly more difficult than Mark Andrews' catch would have been for the 2-point conversion. This is a quarterback that continuously gives his team every opportunity to win, and everyone else around him seems to every year say, we can't help you, Josh. It's got to be just you. And that's not enough going against a team that's now seeking a three-peat. Sorry, it's not going to be enough. And it wasn't yesterday. And here's story number 3.
Toss it to the left side. Barkley's got a lane to the 50, to the 45. Spin move to the 40. Barkley's still going. Zigzags inside. 20, 15, 10. Touchdown. Saquon Barkley. He is incredible.
Ian Eagle on the call for Westwood One, as heard here on Extra Sports 1300. Eagles don't screw it up, and they advance to the Super Bowl. That's what the expectation was. If the Eagles don't screw it up, they will get into the Super Bowl. And how do they not screw it up? By feeding that guy. Now, even Kellen Moore couldn't screw it up when Saquon breaks that run off the second play of the game. But from there was no reason for the Eagles to deviate. And then you saw in many ways the bottom drop out of the Washington Commanders on the biggest stage of their season. It's not entirely surprising that happened with Washington, and it in no way, shape, or form detracts from the remarkable story they were this season and does not dim one bit the brightness of their future. This is conference championship week. Next is the Super Bowl. These are the best teams, the absolute best players, the absolute best teams. And even then, you have to have gone through it. You have to be seasoned. And Washington just didn't have the right combination of those things. You thought with maybe the brilliance of Jaden Daniels that maybe they could get by, but not without the Eagles screwing it up. And they didn't. And the matchup that I'll say, I don't want to say no one, because I know of at least one person that is totally fine with this matchup. And I know that one person also has a son who is totally okay with this matchup and has a coworker that is totally okay with this matchup. But the matchup that very few wanted to see is now going to happen because Kansas City and Philadelphia are the two best teams. 719-247-1313. Coming up next, want to talk about the hilarity that ensued with the Eagles trying to tush push on the goal line against Washington and what the fate of that particular play is, and also a little bit on the Denver Nuggets, it was going so well for them, and then they ran into an old nemesis, and now it's not great again. I like this text from Aaron. Says, we love seeing this Super Bowl matchup. Signed Cavs versus Warriors. Now, to be fair, it's not that bad. Twice in 3 years. But I think that there's a lot to unpack with this matchup. I will say that. I think it'll be an interesting Super Bowl. And if all else fails, at least Kendrick Lamar is performing at halftime. That we can all get behind, right? Or do we have some Drake supporters in our midst? What happened in the Eagles Commanders game at the goal line? Okay, it wasn't as bad of a look as some of the officiating miscues in the Chiefs-Bills game, but it was kind of embarrassing. Like, it was funny there for a minute, and then it kind of got really embarrassing. When Philadelphia is going to do the tush push, we all know they're going to do the tush push, and Washington's like, we can't do anything else. So they have a dude that does the Bobby Boucher jumping over the offensive line, trying to clothesline Jalen Hurts. Like, and we all found out together, no one knew that you could reward a team with the touchdown, or not reward, but penalize the opposite team and say, we're just going to give a touchdown. I mean, it makes some sense, right? You can only half the distance to go so much before you're like, to heck with this. We're just calling it a touchdown. But what happened was it was a little embarrassing, right? And I am not one that says we need to eliminate the tush push. I don't think that at all. And the fact that the Bills don't even know how to run it properly tells me that, you know, until every team starts using it correctly to the point that we have 4 or 5 plays in every single game that are not, you know, not a surprise at all, that are all of a mere formality, I don't think we need to eliminate it. And I think Washington at some point, I get they're playing for their season. Like, don't let them score, but like, you got to stop. But also, too, the Eagles just snap the damn ball. Why are you waiting every second? We all know what's coming. You know you're going to get in the end zone. Just do it already. So I think the Eagles kind of invited Washington to do a bunch of stuff as a last-ditch attempt to stop them. Like, just snap the ball. You know you're going to score. What difference does it make? So, and the way that the referees explained it, I think is perfect for that situation. Like, so much in the NFL needs intervention from an authority figure, right? Some of the technology needs intervention from an authority figure. A situation like that, just be professionals and just get on with it. Right? I don't even know what to call it, but just the Eagles sitting there and waiting and trying to bait them offside. It's like, just snap the ball and get into the end zone and we can move on. And Washington, stop. The 2 times you tried to do something, it didn't work. It's not going to work. Just stop. Wait till the ball is snapped and then try your best. Like, some of it just is self-policing. Be adults. And I don't think either team was doing that in that particular sequence. All right, I went long as I promised. Nuggets Bulls coming up in just a moment. I do want to let you know if you're often feeling tired, lacking motivation and drive, maybe you're gaining weight or noticing a loss of muscle mass. These could all be signs of low testosterone. Don't wait. Find out now at Low T Center. They make it easy to get your levels checked. It's a simple test, and with their on-site lab, you'll get results back right there. And then if it is low T, know that you're in the right place. The experts at Low T Center have over a decade of experience helping patients, and super important, their personal treatment plans are optimized for each patient. These aren't just basic standard treatments like you'll get elsewhere. So get back to your best. Go to lowtcenter.com to book your appointment today. That's lowtcenter.com. Low T Center, reinventing men's healthcare. See if the Nuggets can do a little bit better than they did the other night against the Wolves. They play the Bulls, so they should. That's right now here on Extra Sports 1300.